Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Succession Planning and the Development of Your High Potentials. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen, on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer. So this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send those over throughout the webinar today. So I like to try and weave them in as it relates to the content that we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for a Q&A session. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording, slides, and follow-up information available on our blog after today's session. So that's www.bizlibrary.com/bizblog. I also put a link to the slides for today's session in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should be able to just click on that link and then you can save the slides. I also included a link to the slides in the reminder email that you should have received this morning. Happy to say that today's webinar is approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also email out a link to the certificate and a follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. The most important thing is the program ID or activity ID number. That's what you'll need to record with HRCI. So if you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with Biz Library. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so you can find me on Twitter, both at Biz Library and also at my own account at Jessel Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles, discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing. So if you're on either of those networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for Biz Library. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning, development, and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. So here at Biz Library, we kindly refer to Chris as a recovering lawyer. So you can also find him in social media. So he's on Twitter at Chris Osborne, STL, and he's also on LinkedIn. So I'm sure you'd love it if you reach out and connect as well. To give you just a little bit of background on Biz Library, Biz Library is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. Our award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online employee training videos covering every business topic training area you can think of. So things like communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, Biz Library's LMS, or Learning Management System, and social learning technology platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I actually have a quick kind of housekeeping poll question before we move on to this next one, just to help us with record keeping. So if you are attending today's webinar through the GoToMeeting app or through a mobile device or tablet, if you can let me know through this quick poll. I'm only going to leave it up for a couple of seconds, but we've had some issues with the reports pulling people that are attending through the app or a mobile device recording correctly. So would certainly appreciate that. Want to make sure that we're able to keep track of all you. All right, again, I'll just leave this up for just a couple of seconds and then we will move forward. All right, great, thanks. All right, so this next poll question, you should see it up on your screen right now is, what is your most pressing concern about your next generation of leaders? Is it A, we haven't identified high potentials or hypos, B, skill gaps, C, no development plan in place, D, no resources available to develop our leaders, or E, something else?
Hey, Jessica, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm
Good.
good.
Good to hear.
Yeah, and we know that on this particular poll question, by the way, we know it could be some combination of these. We're just looking for your most pressing concern. So don't worry that it could be many of them. It's okay. Yeah, I'm trying to stay cool enough to function effectively today. It's been brutally hot here in St. Louis.
I should have challenged you to the ice bucket then.
I was very happy that you didn't. I was a little worried about that when I saw your video. I going, oh no, oh no.
I almost did. But you guys have it lucky. I guess it's not really lucky. You're really hot. It's not quite as hot up here.
Yep. Well, speaking of hot, this is
right.
a very hot topic in the
right.
HR and business space. I mean, this is a fairly new webinar for us. We haven't done this one too many times, and I've always enjoyed this. You and I have talked about this subject matter for a long time, and I've always enjoyed working in this space. So this is one of my favorite topics. So.
Right. I mean, everywhere. I mean, you see everywhere. The two biggest areas are really on identifying high potentials, skill gaps, and also developing. Actually, every article or blog or anything in the space of training and development in HR is talking about these things. So it's definitely becoming in the forefront of a lot of our organizations' minds with due cause. All right, cool. I'll go ahead and close it out and share the results. So we've got, let's see, 41% said no development plan in place, 20% skill gaps, 19 haven't identified hypos, 10% no resources, and then 10% said something else. So that's pretty cool. I mean, if it's, if everyone's kind of gone through all those beginning steps, I mean, we'll talk about a process in today's webinar, but, the development plan comes towards the end, is kind of an ongoing piece of it towards the end of the process, at least.
Right. You're exactly right, Jessica. That's a good point. So yeah, interesting poll results. So yeah, I'm anxious to see how we get what the reaction to the content today is. And by the way, Jessica and I really do appreciate, and we do try to take questions as we go through the session. So if you have questions or comments or observations as we go through the content today, please feel free to get them out there for us. We'll happily take them. So no worries at all. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to kick things off today with this quote from Robert Fulmer. So Chris, I'm going to pass it over to you. You can get us going.
All right, and hopefully we see that quote. Is that right?
Yeah, we are good to go.
This is a great quote. Once in a while you find one that really, from a strategic perspective, lays out what you need to talk about, and this is one of those examples. It's not just succession to the top. It's getting the right person in place for every job. Some of tomorrow's key jobs may not even exist now. And this is right at the heart of high potential development, succession planning, leadership development, manager training. This is at the heart of a shift, a major shift in the role of learning and development for all of us. And we have to come to grips with this. Some of tomorrow's key jobs may not even exist now. And this just requires us to approach so many things in just the broad employee development space differently than we ever have before. We have to think about what we're trying to accomplish, how we're accomplishing those things, and frankly, we have to think a little differently about our role as learning leaders in our organization to make this happen. So we're going to talk to you today about 3 objectives. We want to talk about best practices as we see them emerging in succession planning and high potential development programs. We want to give you a practical model for selecting participants for succession planning or high potential development program. And by the way, we see these as not necessarily interchangeable, but so closely related that they merit being treated very similarly. So that's why we put them together today. And then we want to provide for you a model for determining the development targets and competencies for your program. So again, just a model, because not every organization needs the same things, but if we can give you an analytical model that you can begin working with, you can begin to get to good answers for your organization. So let's start off with some of these trends that Fulmer was relating to that have led to that conclusion about sort of this shifting role, like getting the right people in our organization, then getting them in the right job, and then the recognition that some critical roles may not exist today. So there are these broad market forces and trends that are affecting so many things in our organization, and these have to do with demographics, just the demographic shifts that we're seeing, boomers hanging around longer, the rise of the millennials. We see technology changes. I mean, think about all of the innovations and efficiency changes and improvements around our organization. Do any of them not have a basis in technology? They all do, basically, don't they? And we see behavior changes, the way people access information and the way people absorb information. Just think of the amount of time people spend online taking in video. We see a new competency model for leaders beginning to evolve and emerge to meet the challenges that these market forces are bringing to our organization. We've seen these market forces described with an acronym VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And in order for leaders to function effectively, we're seeing sort of a different looking competency model begin to emerge, kind of interesting. And these jobs, we've got a really wonderful infographic prepared actually by LinkedIn that we're going to share with you in just a minute, just a piece of it. But really striking, the information there. And just reduced employee loyalty. And this is neither bad nor good. This is just something that we're going to have to come to grips with. And there's really a couple of different factors at play here. Daniel Pink several years ago wrote a book called Free Agent Nation, in which he identified sort of a shift in the way employees view the relationship with their employers. It used to be this old, kind of compact between employer and employee. The employer brings you on board, and they keep you for 30 years, you retire, you get a gold watch, and off you go. Well, something happened to that compact, and employers began at some point to look at employees as kind of fungible, easy to replace, replaceable parts, and looking for lower cost employee solutions, lower labor, and it's kind of hard to expect employees to reciprocate loyalty that isn't given to them. And then you have the economic downturn of the past several years with huge, huge layoffs, and the job market still hasn't really rebounded. And then you have on top of that the fact that we see young people entering the job market today with the expectation that they may have upwards of 10 or 12 different careers in their work life, not just jobs, but careers. It is just a different work world where individuals are more dialed into loyalty to themselves, their career advancement, and their families, as opposed to organizational loyalty. Again, it's not bad, it's not good, and I could debate the merits of this for hours with people. I have, but it's just something we have to come to grips with. This is that infographic I mentioned. Jessica kind of pulled some interesting pieces out of this, but LinkedIn looked at over 259 million, that's million profiles, and these are self-identified job titles within profiles to look at how often they appeared in 2008 compared to how much they'd appeared in 2013. And look at some of these. Social media intern, 174 times growth in 5 years. The cloud services specialist, the big data architect, none. Not a single job, not a single LinkedIn profile had one in 2008 and 3,400 by 2013. Now, Zoomed instructor, that's kind of fun, but the rise in fitness, and then the data scientist, only 140 in 2008, but 4,300 by 2013. And there are other jobs that fit this description. Think of my chosen profession, marketing, digital marketing, social media marketing specialists. I mean, there are jobs that are critical to the success of modern marketing functions that didn't exist 3 to 5 years ago. It literally did not exist. And you couldn't have predicted these jobs in many ways. So what kind of jobs are going to be important in your organization 3 to 5 years from now? Do you know? Probably not. So this creates an interesting, I think interesting, development challenge for us. How do we prepare our organization? How do we prepare leaders and our employees to learn jobs that don't exist yet? Kind of an interesting shift away from the traditional approach to learning and development. So here are what we see emerging as 5 best practices associated with succession planning in high development that will help achieve bottom line results. And we're going to deal with all 5 of these. The first 2 are very, very closely related. And Jessica, I'm going to give you a little bit of a heads up. I just sent you an email a little bit ago. I reordered a couple of slides in here to, I think, improve the flow a little bit better. But here are the 5. Aligned with organizational strategic objectives, and we treat the term aligned a little differently than you might be used to, so we'll define that for you in just a minute. It requires a real analysis of current and future capabilities of your organization, your leaders, and your workforce. And this is where we have this practical model to really build that out. It needs to be a program with a relentless focus on potential and values. And we're talking about workplace values, not personal values, but workplace values. But it really it is not a focus on current capabilities, but the potential. The participants that you have involved in your program have to perceive the program as relevant and real to improving their career, to improving their skills. This is extremely important, particularly when you're dealing with millennials. And last but not least, it has to drive the culture of continuous learning and development. Again, going back to that idea that we are likely to need jobs in our organization that don't exist today. So how do we prepare an organization? How do we prepare employees? How do we prepare leaders to take us forward when we don't really know all of the jobs that we're going to need as an organization to succeed 3, 4, 5 years out? Well, if we are building a culture of continuous learning, continuous development, where we increase the capacity for improvement, we're taking a huge step forward in our ability to succeed in a marketplace like that. Okay, so each of these 5 steps. So let's start with that framework that will help us with those first 2 steps, creating true alignment with organizational goals and understanding at the same time, truly understanding our capacity, our capabilities, future and current capabilities. Jessica, I have to pause. There's a great comment there in chat. I'm going to let you go ahead and put it out there for us.
Oh, yeah. So Wesley sent over a good comment. He said, I'm a Gen Xer and graduated college in '94. So we were told at the commencement that we'd have between 5 and 10 careers. So he's only on number 2 after graduating in '94. So he thinks this is a great topic, but an interesting
observation, right, from one of our participants. And I've had all 3 of my kids have graduated from college fairly recently, and the number is higher today is what they're telling them. But yeah, Wesley, you're right, and you're going to have several more careers, and I hope they're all successful and rewarding. But yeah, it's a different work world out there. So anyway, and hopefully some of what we're going to talk about today is going to be pertinent.
Right.
To
I mean, to me, I mean, that's like, what is that, 20 years? So to have 2, I mean, I guess if you look at if it's careers versus job roles, if you're defining them differently or the same. You know, to have only 2 job roles after 20 years, I would say that's in the minority compared to what a lot of employees have. But if you're talking about an entire career change, then maybe I can, you know.
Right. Yeah, but 2 careers in 20 years is pretty amazing. I shudder to think how many I've had.
Chris himself is a bit of a career chameleon. If you looked at his LinkedIn profile, you will see.
Yeah, I've done a lot of different things. So, okay, well, let's get back to this framework.
Okay,
I think this is a really great way to get at this. You know, Jessica mentioned I've done a lot of consulting, and a SWOT analysis is a consultant's tool that I wanted to bring to you today because this is actually, it's a tried and true tool. I've used this a lot, and I love it. And when this is applied well, it yields some great information. Okay, so SWOT is an acronym that stands for Strengths and Weaknesses, Opportunities and Threats. Okay, so the strengths and weaknesses, that is an internal focus. So strengths are what do we do well today, and will our strengths prepare us for future success? Again, this is the idea. We're going to cast this a little bit towards succession planning and high potential development. This is an orientation towards future. Weaknesses, what do we do poorly and why? Can we do less of this? What steps must we take to improve or minimize the risks? And then the last 2 pieces of the acronym, opportunities and threats, this is analysis of external factors, opportunities. What are our greatest opportunities for growth? Are our strengths aligned to take advantage of them? Our weaknesses stand in the way? And threats, where are we vulnerable? You know, are threats market-driven? Are they competition, lack of talent, not the right talent? So that's the way this is broken down. So our strategic goal alignment requires us to have a good understanding of both our internal strengths and weaknesses and where we fit in to the industry, to the market, again, opportunities and threats, okay? So this is an extremely important piece of this. We need to understand where we are today, where the industry is today. We have to have some visibility into at least the near term and make some educated, sometimes guesses, but some educated estimates about the midterm future. And when we're talking about alignment, it is very much like looking through one of these viewfinders. You know, you look out in the distance and you have to adjust the lens to get it focused. And if you want to look at something else, you shift. What do you have to do to the focus? You also have to adjust it. Alignment needs to be thought of as a process of continuous adjustment. So you keep the relative parts of your organization and your program in their proper relative position. So alignment, strategic goal alignment, is not a strategic planning session where you line everything up on a board or a piece of paper, or you lay out everybody's roles and you walk away because now you've got these cascading goals and you've got everybody kind of in their place and you walk away. It is a process of continuous adjustment whereby you are looking all the time at whether you're on track or off track on your goals. You're looking at trend lines. You're looking at goals weekly, monthly, biweekly, quarterly. And when you're on track, great. If you're off track, you adjust. You change behaviors. You tweak. You adjust. You provide additional development, additional training, and you move towards an objective that's set forth with good goal setting. You know, Harvard Business School has been doing studies for years and have found that, you know, less than 20% of organizations ever achieve their strategic goals. And a big part of it is they don't approach strategic goal setting and strategic goal alignment as a process of continuous adjustment. And that's why it's so important to think of it that way, okay? So, you know, you think about, you know, our opportunities and threats. This is really, really a big piece of selecting these goals. You know, are our strengths aligned to take advantage of these opportunities, and do our weaknesses stand in the way in terms of opportunities? This is where we want to really focus energy and effort. These are places where we can win. These are places that give us opportunities to win today, tomorrow, into the near-term future. Threats, you know, where are we vulnerable? Are we vulnerable because we're not innovative enough? Are there innovations in the marketplace that threaten to take market share from us? Is it competitive? Can we influence or control our biggest threats? This is an important piece of the analysis that we need to do here. That's a big piece of it. And this lack of talent or not the right talent, I know that seems like it's an internal piece of it, but step back and think about it. What's happening in the marketplace with the competition for talent right now? It's intense. It's very difficult sometimes to fill key spots. So what can you do about that? Do you want to get out and compete for talent outside, or do you want to work hard to retain internal talent? Is your top talent at risk for leaving? Are there external threats recruiting your best talent? That's why that is there. That's an important piece of it. So this really begins to get at this, which leads us right to this next piece of this. When you're looking at high potentials in a succession planning program, looking at your opportunities, looking at your threats, looking at your strengths, looking at your weaknesses, one of the most foundational decisions you have to make is deciding whom to groom. Who's going to participate in this program? Exactly what is this program going to look like? What's it going to entail? And this becomes a critical strategic decision that will impact the success or failure of any high potential program or succession planning program you've got. So we wanted to try to provide sort of a model, I think a practical model that you can use to begin pulling people into these programs. And one of the first elements, and I'm always a little surprised, I was always a little bit surprised when I used to do this sort of work out in the consulting world, is how frequently we would work with candidates that clients or organizations would say, well, this is a high potential employee. And they weren't ready. They just weren't ready. But for a whole range of reasons. They weren't at the right place in their career. It wasn't something that they wanted in their career. They didn't quite have the right credentials. Just a whole range of readiness issues. So this is sort of the price of admission, so to speak, for succession planning programs and for high potential programs. And start with the simplest, easiest way to do this, self-selection. Announce the program, lay out what the objectives are, lay out who's eligible to participate, and ask people to self-select. Are you interested in participating? We're going to take volunteers to participate in this program. You may be very surprised at the people who you didn't think would be interested to raise their hand. You may find great leadership talent, untapped talent in your organization that you didn't know you had. You may see people in your organization that you thought absolutely were going to be groomed for senior leadership roles that step back and have no interest whatsoever in participating in a succession planning program seeking senior leadership roles. They want to be, in a professional role or an individual contributor role. They don't want to self-select. That is a key part of readiness. Jessica, I'm seeing a lot of comments and questions. I'm just going to trust your judgment to get them to me when you think it's appropriate, okay?
Yes, I'll just add a couple of comments. We got one in from Tess. She said personally, so this is around succession planning in general. This one's from Tess. She says, personally, very few of organizations I worked for have focused on succession planning. Instead, I've harnessed certain skills into a side business. I've had seen many of my colleagues do the same because their employers didn't recognize the talent that they had on their hands. So that's kind of another, as you're talking about the challenges of retaining our employees or keeping them focused and keeping them engaged. That's another aspect added from Tess. And then from John, he adds, he's the resident millennial, as he's tagged himself. I think today's job market has changed drastically over the years, causing the frequent career changes in addition to a million other reasons. So totally agree, John. I'm a millennial as well.
Yeah, my whole team are millennials, John. I am not, but my behaviors tend to be more millennial than not. I think Jessica would agree with that, particularly when it comes to technology, and as it turns out, my career. But yeah, both of those comments are spot on, by the way. And when I was talking about threats, that's actually one of the reasons I put the talent piece in the threat area, and that's a big piece of this self-selection. You may have individuals in your organization that have talents that you don't know about, and that's why it's important to allow people to tell you, you know what, I would like opportunities for additional development. Okay, I think it's an important. My professional opinion is this is a piece of succession planning and high potential development that a lot of organizations do not effectively utilize. Then the next piece is assessments, and you're just going to have to find the assessment tools that work best in your organization. It could run the range of personality and values-driven, behavior-driven assessments. There are many good ones on the marketplace. You could assess competencies in terms of sort of where they are today, test competencies in terms of what you're looking for in those next more complicated roles. This will also help you understand where they are in terms of their career. So just for example, to be a vice president of human resources professionals need exposure and an understanding of certain level of complexity on a range of HR topics and HR issues. So do these individuals that are signing up for your program in human resources, are they ready for manager, supervisor, manager, director, or VP level roles? You're going to have to assess where they are on their career continuum in terms of readiness for that next level role. That's what we're getting at there. And then last but not least, don't discount the power of observation. Your observation, other managers, other supervisors' observations, informed professional judgment can be very helpful here, but don't rely on that alone. So when you blend all this together, you can end up with a pretty good set of tools to begin to help you make some good choices about who should participate. This is another old-fashioned consultant tool, these 4 squares. So this is like performance ratings. So performance ratings of others, performance ratings of self. So you got high on the upper left and lower right, low in the middle of the axis. So if you think about who you want participating in your high potential programs, each of these quadrants represent different types of challenges, right? So if you're in the upper right-hand area, those are folks that are really, really right there. Those are folks that are definitely ready for participation in these programs. Each of the other 3 boxes represents coaching challenges in a variety of different ways. Lower left hand, that's a whole, that's a different kind of area. Low self, performance ratings and low others. You got a mismatch probably between skills and job. There's a whole range of issues that could be going on that you need to address. The one that's the most interesting to me, though, is the low self rating, but the high others. So these are individuals who don't see themselves performing well or performing well in their role, but others see them doing very well. So this is another area where coaching could be extremely important. It could be a motivation issue. This may be an area where they're doing well, but they aren't necessarily motivated to pursue this area for their career. So you may have career goals misaligned with their current job role. These people have the potential to move to the upper right. You just have to work your way through the challenges of figuring out why their self-evaluations are lower than others and find ways to move them into that upper right-hand opportunity. And ultimately what we're looking for is potential. There was a fabulous article that was on the cover of Harvard Business Review a few weeks ago, and it really talked about succession planning in the vein of how critical it is to focus on potential with these 4 characteristics as true indicators of the potential for success. Far better indicators, according to the research and the data cited in the article, than experience, than age, than all sorts of things. And it was just a great article, but I love these 4 traits. And if you step back and think about them, think about high-performing employees in your organizations, and ask yourself if they don't demonstrate these 4 traits. Curiosity. These are people that are determined to figure things out and they're interested in learning. They demonstrate insight. They're able to really dive into complex situations and understand themes and what's going on. They're engaged. These are your most engaged employees, and they're determined. This is one that I really found interesting when I was reading through the data and reading through the articles, or the article. And Jessica's asking me in chat what was the title of the article, and I am, for the life of me, trying to remember what it was, and I don't remember. I'm embarrassed. It was Alvarado was the author, Harvard Business Review. We'll have to look that up here. But the determination piece, that the way he described determination was what happens when an obstacle is put in front of you. Do these people show a determination to get around it and overcome? And when people show these 4 traits, these are high potential, highly valued employees, absolutely with the potential for big time success. So again, looking for potential, look for employees with those traits. And so when you put that on a 4 square, here's what you have. You got low performance, low potential in the lower right hand, potential on the left, and performance on the horizontal plane on the bottom. You got low potential, low performance, and high potential. Again, that's one of these coaching issues. You got somebody that's not doing pretty well, but great potential. That could be a coaching issue. You know, again, you may have a mismatch between job role and where they are. And then in the lower right-hand corner, you got somebody that's performing really well on one hand, but you would expect that they have low potential to do well in that job, be real interested to know why and how they're performing well. This is somebody that maybe has a high degree of determination, curiosity. I'd like to know how they're doing that. Again, these could be, you know, a high-performance employee in disguise there. Okay, that's an interesting quadrant to me on this 4 square. And then obviously the folks in the upper right-hand in the green, these are your A performers that you definitely want your high potential program. So the purple and orange are lots of coaching, lots of questions, lots of inquiry. Upper right, definite participants. Okay? So really great tools to begin to look at this. And we talked earlier, so we gave you those 4 traits: the curiosity, insight, engagement, and determination. And this is another piece that goes along with that, and this is this emerging competency model that we're beginning to see show up in a variety of different thought leadership places. We first saw something like this in a book written by Gene Meister called The 2020 Workplace. And on the left-hand side, these are 5 leadership competencies that I kind of assimilated from, I probably looked at 150 different competency models for leaders that I saw first, you know, in the 50s. I didn't see them in the 50s, but they range back into the 50s all the way into the early 1980s. And in some way or another, you could find these 5 pieces in most of them: vision and personal skills, ability to develop others, intelligence, character. Now, we're not saying that these aren't important in one way or another, and we'd like to have leaders that are intelligent and have high character. Those are important. But we're seeing a different type of leader begin to emerge to deal with this marketplace. Yes, Jessica, that's it, the big idea, 21st century talent spotting. Thank you very much. I had the wrong author, it wasn't Alvarado. This is a different type of model that's beginning to emerge. Collaborative skills are important. Learning agility, the ability to learn and acquire new skills. People development. I love the 4th one, digital literacy. God, that's just hugely important. Think about how much we're dependent upon technology today in global citizenship, which is really just exactly what it sounds like, being able to understand how our organization fits into a broader marketplace all around us. So an interesting way to get at this. All right, so the 4th of the 5 best practices is that your participants need to understand why the program they're participating in is relevant to their job role, and we have to provide great support to make them be successful. So this requires really a couple of very straightforward, fairly simple communication pieces, But the communication in this space has to be continuous. We have to have a real dedication to communicating. So we want to clearly define the standards. That is, what's it take to participate? What's it take to be eligible? What do we expect while you're participating? What are the requirements to, complete the program? And what are the competencies that we're looking to enhance, to develop, or introduce to the participants in the program? So don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. Just think through those elements. Clearly define the standards for participation, for completion, what is going to be required to be a part of the program, and identify the competencies that you're either going to work to improve, enhance, or introduce. It does not have to be any more complex than that, but once you start down the path of communicating, make sure that your communication plan is comprehensive. It can't just be face-to-face. It can't just be email. It needs to be face-to-face and email and in social learning tools and on your social learning platform and with your managers and with your supervisors and from your executives. Everybody has to be bought into what's going on. This needs to be a strategic approach to this and cannot be just a one-off thing. This is a great quote. Ron Ashkenaz, The Paradox of High Potentials. This came from the Harvard Business Review, and this ties right into what we're talking about there. Managers need to stretch, challenge, and coach their high potential employees. Without multi-dimensional dialogue about these issues, managers tend to hold on to their high potential people instead of helping them along an intentional developmental pathway. High potentials may then interpret this as a lack of company support and will be inclined to look elsewhere. Okay? So it's really critical that we are providing not only relevancy to the perceived relevancy for the participants, but also that support. We have to make sure that the managers of the participants understand how to coach and support the participants of the program. All right, so the fifth of the 5 best practices is we're looking to build a culture of continuous learning, so that what we're essentially doing is increasing the capacity for change within our organization. If you step back and think about it, I mean, this is totally logical, and the people here, you're all going to totally get this. But, what is learning and development? It is taking ourselves from one state of performance to an improved state. It's all about change, isn't it? And it always has been. So if you are passionate about learning, you're also fundamentally passionate about improvement and passionate about change. Now, you may not have thought about it that way before, but it's probably the case on some level, okay? And that's really what a learning culture is about when we talk about that as the underpinning of your organization. It is helping to expand or improve the capacity for improvement and change within our organization. Now, it's not change for change's sake. It's strategic change. Change aimed at achieving organizational objectives. It's change aimed at remaining relevant and competitive in this marketplace. So there are 5 key elements to a learning culture. Holistic thinking, that is, your employees understand how what they do contributes to the overall success of the organization. So when you see an organization that works in very strict silos, everybody's got their silo and people don't really work together very effectively or communicate, and they really only know what they do, that's not holistic thinking. Okay? That is probably not a learning culture. Okay? Learning is integrated in the day-to-day workflow. Your managers, when you've got a culture of continuous learning, a learning culture, the managers understand how to integrate learning into day-to-day work. They're asking questions. They're pushing employees to learn and challenging employees to learn new things. There's a capacity for change. People are pushed to improve, and improvement is recognized and honored, and managers understand how to do that. There's a lot of collaboration that happens when organizations have a strong learning culture. People share information. It's just really some great stuff. And then the last piece of it is there's a real commitment to learning, personal commitments from the entire organization. Not just us, not just us as the leaders of the learning program, but every employee. Every employee has a personal commitment to learning. That's what's really important. And then this is just some additional pieces of this. When we're talking about succession planning and leadership development, it's really important that you don't just focus on sort of replacement planning. Going back to Fulmer's quote at the beginning, this is really about focusing on our leaders at every level of our organization. So we're developing leaders at the executive level, advanced leadership, supervisory and team leaders, and we're also looking for those high potential employees that we can work with at every level of our organization. And if you think about succession planning, I've got a couple of really interesting slides here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and we've got some questions I want to make sure we get to. But if you think about succession planning as a process, not an event, but a process, there are 4 phases to it, where we've got adoption at the end. This is where, we've really moved into that next role, and this is now who we are. There's the transition phase. There's an exploration and consideration phase before we make the promotion. This is a great chart that appeared in T&D magazine from December 2011 that really goes through this. So you got the pre-promotion and post-promotion. And I love the way they break this out. We're going to consider this. So this is the selection piece. This is where that self-selection, assessments, observation comes into place. Then there's the exploration phase, where we really let people try it out for size. We're doing a lot of training, job rotation projects. And then succession planning. Best practices succession planning spans the time before and after promotion. And we're helping our newly promoted managers, supervisors, directors, vice presidents, whatever the case may be, until they really take on the professional identity of their new role. They've adopted the new role. This is really where they are, and sometimes that takes time. So it's a full-blown process, including pre-promotion and post-promotion, that really links this all together. So just to quickly recap the 5 pieces that we see present in best practices, succession planning, and high potential programs. They are aligned with the organization's strategic objectives, which means that you've got in place a process for continuous adjustment. It requires an analysis of current and future capabilities, so you understand what you're aiming at, how you're going to get there. That's where the SWOT analysis comes in. It's a great way to link those 2 pieces together. It's focused on potential around those 4 characteristics or values we talked about earlier. You have to have the program perceived as relevant and real by the participants, and the whole objective at the end, the end game, the strategic end game, is to build a culture of continuous learning and development. All right. Jessica, I'm not sure how you want to do this, if you want to do questions in a little bit, or if you want to take them now. It's up to you completely.
We have lots of great questions. I'll go ahead and keep them coming in. I'll go through a couple of recommended resources, and then I'll throw them over to you. Does that sound good, Chris?
Perfect.
All right, cool. So 2 resources that I recommend for today's attendees should seem up on your screen now. This first one is called, it's a business impact course. It's included in the Biz Library collection, but these are some of my favorite ones just because it puts you in the driver's seat. So instead of kind of a more traditional e-learning course, you're put in a situation given different resources. So things like you'll see a video that represents a meeting with maybe your manager or an employee. You'll have access to voicemails and different emails and articles. And the specific one, it's targeted to managers, so it discusses different strategies that allow that manager to maintain personnel in key areas. So it really focuses on understanding the different critical roles and functions necessary for that organization. And then it's about 7 to 15 minutes to complete. So short and sweet, like most of us like. This next one is also a short video. You must ask the right questions to adapt. So this is a good one for your leadership team or your senior executives. So this will help them start to ask the right questions of what's needed for the vision of the organization and where you're going, and in turn what you're going to need your employees to have and what competencies you'll need. So those are 2 recommended resources. They're all included in the Biz Library collection, so you're welcome to try those out, as well as any of the additional 7,000 courses. So that's videos, e-learning courses, 25 different topic areas, and set up to where your employees get unlimited access. So I'll put a quick poll up as we type questions in. Just let me know if you'd like to do a free trial. All right, first question, Chris, came in from Amy. She asks how do we get senior leadership to employ the self-select option first? My management team only selects people who are nominated by others for their career development programs. How can we convince them to open up to the idea of self-selecting?
Whoa, Amy, that's a great question, and I wish I had a equally great and simple answer. The truth of the matter is I don't, but I do have a few ways that you can at least begin to break down some of that sort of static that exists between we're going to just take people that are nominated and what I see as a great best practice, and it is to open it up to self-selection. One of the things that happens when people are just nominated for programs, and this is, I'm going to have to leave it up to you because I'm not present, so I don't really know all the internal politics within your organization. But that's exactly what can happen sometimes, is we end up with a lot of internal politics coming into play. And I use Jessica frequently as my sort of crash test dummy on a lot of examples, and I'm going to use her again. But if we were going to do a high potential program here at Biz Library, and the president of the company came to all the vice presidents and said, who in your organization, who in your team, would you nominate? And I put Jessica's name out there for that. People on the senior leadership team would likely accept that as a legitimate nomination. They would also, and I think fairly, look at me and kind of go, well, yeah, but you and Jessica have a great working relationship. You're very fond of Jessica. You guys have worked really closely together for a number of years. There could be interpreted in that nomination some internal politics. I'm going to bat for an employee that I happen to value greatly. She's on my team. I'm going to advocate for her, which, by the way, I would do. And that's what you run into when you have others nominating people as the first wave. The other piece of it is, and this would be important for you to do, is to go back through participants and find examples of folks that were nominated that either didn't complete the program or were not successful in the program. Maybe you've had a great program and it's always been successful. Maybe not. But that would be an important piece of it to be able to go through. And the other piece of it would be to point out to senior management, look, how do we know that we're getting all of the candidates who really want and might make, who really want extra development opportunities and who might make really good future leaders unless we ask? We may be leaving untapped resources on the table. And that is something that senior management hates, is the waste of resources. And that would be a good way to get at that. So I know that's not an easy answer to a really, really great, very direct question, but there's a lot of internal politics involved in getting around that, and that's the best answer. That's the best answer I've got for you, and I wish I had a simpler way to get at that.
Yeah, I actually read an article this morning from TLNT that I put a link to it in the chat title, but it talks about having a holistic view. So by only focusing on our high potentials, are we potentially damaging the rest of our employees or their morale or their engagement? So if we're allowing employees to kind of step up or giving them opportunities or just opening it up, that can do a lot for employees, and maybe they will become a high potential just because the opportunity was put in front of them.
Right. That's a good point, Jessica.
All right, so this next question comes from Yanette. So she is a loyal webinar attendee, so we thank Yanette for always joining us and always having great questions and insights. So this one, she says, how can organizational leaders be objective when it comes to aligning those competencies and identifying high potentials? The selection process of high potentials could be very risky when leaders use the same competencies matrix but may interpret them differently. So for example, Chris, you always talk about what does success look like, but when you look at some organizations, there's a gap between departments where the competencies are clearly visible among the employees. Other departments, not so much. So somewhere they are not aligned with the overall organization.
Yeah, and Annette, you're right. There is some risk associated with that, and you really hit the nail on the head with visibility, and I would even say transparency on some level about what success looks like team to team and across the organization for employees. I mean, stop and think about that for just a second. I mean, so you've got a team of motivated employees, and everybody's working really hard, and at the end of 6 months, you bring them all together and say, oh, we really had a bad last 6 months. And everybody kind of looks at each other and go, when did that happen? How fair is that? It's not very, is it? On the other hand, flip it around. So you've got a team of really hardworking employees, and everybody's working really hard, and then after 6 months, you get them together and say, hey, we did pretty well. And everybody kind of looks at each other and go, okay, how did we do that? Well, why? It's also unfair. So ultimately, transparency and clear visibility into what is and what isn't success for each employee is extremely important. And that's where selecting high potentials based upon clearly visible, clearly transparent sets of competencies and definitions of success role by role across the organization is so important. So you don't have to worry about whether there's favorites being played. Everybody understands that to be a successful HR manager in this organization, here are the 3 things that our best HR managers do. They, have this piece of credentials. They do these 2 things very well. Here's what our best sales managers do. Here's what our best customer service supervisors do. Here, when it's real clear to everybody what it takes to be successful, then that cascades into so many other really important things. And the other part of it that's so critical is when employees themselves can look very quickly and be able to see on measurable, easy to understand metrics, hey, here's how my performance is going to be measured, or here's how the team's performance is going to be measured, and I know what my contribution to the team is, and hey, we're either on track or not on track, and we're looking at this every week, going back to the idea of continuous adjustment. That's another really important part of having things very visible, because people know what they need to do to deliver on those results. So yeah, going back, Janette, you mentioned that, I talk about what does success look like and how will you know it. Those are simple questions, but answering those simple questions is sometimes not always easy to do, but it is really important to keep your inquiry, about those things just like that. And for your succession planning and high potential development programs, keep your inquiry focused just like that. What will a successful high potential program look like, and how will we know it? And that may include how will we select people? How will we drive participation? How will we engage participants? And then how will we know they're engaged? How will we know that their participation is along the lines that we need it? And these are all really important pieces of it, and they help really clarify the touchstone that you're on, Janette, which is really important.
All right, one more question. This one's from Teresa. She asked, if management asks for self-selection or volunteers, how do we manage a situation of those who volunteer, but they may not be high potentials?
Another good question. I think we get this every time we do this webinar, too. You owe it to them to be honest. That's the first thing. But this gets back to the transparency piece of it. You have to make it clear. Go back to what we talked about with the communications. You have to make it very clear what are the requirements to be eligible to participate in the program. What are the requirements to successfully complete the program? So if somebody says, I want to be in the program, and they're really not ready for it, then sit down and tell them, okay, Chris, you're not ready, and here's why. You're currently at a senior lead in your team. To advance to supervisor, you need 3 years of experience. You currently have 2. We've never seen anybody with less than 3 years be successful, so you need another year of experience. On top of that, I need you to get this certification. You've been taking some courses, but I need you to get this certification, and I need these two competencies to be improved to this level of mastery to participate in the program. So if you'll wait till next year to apply, you'll finish your certification and you'll work on development in those two areas, reapply next year, it's very likely you'll be eligible to participate. So you do two things. You make the participation requirements clear, and then you give honest feedback about what they can do to develop themselves so that they might be eligible to participate next year. And if they're really never going to be eligible to participate, you owe it to yourself and to the employee to have that courageous conversation as well.
All right, great questions today. I'll go ahead and wrap up right at time. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link to the completion certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll also send a follow-up email. You should receive that in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. That'll include a link to the certificate as well as the webinar recording and any follow-up information. We hold these webinars every week, so hope you'll consider joining us for a future session. We have another one on Thursday, so it's on social leadership development. And then the following week, we have building a business case, new hire training, and why short video gets big results. So all of our upcoming webinars are listed on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. So again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Chris, for presenting. I hope to see you at a future session.
Yeah, thanks everybody for attending. We really appreciate it.